Welcome back to Scary Urban Legends, and huge shout out to Kezel Charles for recommending Caribbean Islands. So guess what? We're gonna do Caribbean Islands. I'm your host Andrew, and today we're gonna talk about the top 10 Cuba Scary Urban Legends. Coming at number 10, La Milagrosa. In Havana's main cemetery, named the Necropolis Cristobal Colon, there are reports that the grave of La Milagrosa lies there and is spotted by many who walk the grounds. Since being built in 1876, this cemetery was considered to be very holy, and this is where many people would go for prayers. One statue in the cemetery in particular stands out, not because it's beautiful and one of the largest, but because of the haunting yet saddening story behind it. La Milagrosa is often linked to the tomb of Emilia Goyi de la Hoz, since she passed away during childbirth and was buried with her baby at her feet. Her husband Jose used to visit her tomb every day for 40 years until his death. In a ritual, he used to knock her grave 3 times with his hand over the grave. Her husband Jose used to visit her tomb every single day for 40 years until his death. In a ritual, he used to knock her grave in 3 times to wake her up, talking to her while keeping his hand over the grave. Many people would see him talking to her grave, and eventually others began to do the ritual, only to be met with La Milagrosa. Here she is said to grant your wishes, but with consequences too big to consider. At our number 9 spot, we have Madre de Agua. This creature is straight out of Cuban mythology, and when translated means mother of the water. This creature appears as a giant boa snake that is larger than any snake we see today and is as thick as a palm tree. This creature also appears with 2 horns on the side of their heads, scaly skin, and it's tough enough to stop bullets or sharp objects from piercing its skin. See, when I thought of the mother of the water, I thought of a nice water spirit that can calm waves, save drowning people, but no, we got this aggressive and dangerous creature as our mother. It's said to inhabit the rivers and lakes in Cuba, and the reason they do this is because wherever they are, the water will never dry out. If you encounter this creature, then you're probably screwed because it's immortal, and anyone who has tried to kill it or capture it passes away pretty quickly. I mean, when we have a large snake, we know nothing can come good from it. Just look at Adam and Eve, or even look at the movies like Anaconda or Snakes on a Plane, if you don't believe me. At number 8 spot, we have the Light of Yara. This is a tale most Cubans are told when they're children, so this was pretty popular back there. The Light of Yara, or Light of Yara, follows Cuba's Aboriginal past. So, a Spaniard by the name of Atui led a rebellion against Spanish opposition back in the 16th century. They got overwhelmed and had to flee to Baracoa, which was a town in Cuba. It was a very beautiful town. They defended it, but eventually got overwhelmed yet again, and Atui later got captured and burned at the stake in Yara in February 2nd, 1512. So now locals claim that since his passing, a mysterious light can be seen in the fields of Yara. They believe his soul has become the light and wanders the fields endlessly. Fishermen claim that when the light is seen near them, the fish come in boatloads and they won't bite you. Except if you decide to boast about yourself or even mock the Light of Yara, the light will follow you until you are driven to insanity. At number 7 spot, we have Hotel Nacional de Cuba. The feeling of being in this hotel is said to feel like a party scene from The Shining. Beautiful yet terrible. Opened as the National Hotel of Cuba on December 30th, 1930, the hotel was designed by the prestigious architectural firm McKim, Med and White, which also designed such iconic buildings as Columbia University in New York City and the Boston Public Library. Legends hold that a variety of ghostly figures have been seen throughout the hotel, including the ghost of Frank Sinatra himself, who famously performed here to entertain a meeting of some of the United States' most notorious mobsters. Another frequent haunting occurrence includes seeing the antique hands that indicate the location of elevators between floors moving wildly and without reason, adjusted by unseen hands. This hotel still stands, but the large ballrooms and dining halls that are less occupied and are noticeably darker may have a thing or two to do with the haunting aspect of the hotel. At number 6 spot, we have Guantanamo's ghost prisoners. The military prison at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, took its first 20 detainees in 2002. Despite various calls to shutter it, it still stands almost 20 years later. It was built in order to house prisoners captured in Afghanistan and other terrorists. At its peak, it housed just under 800 people, with many of the prisoners being detained without any sort of trial. In the early days of the detention camp, many of the prisoners were tortured physically and mentally. So this prison was the real deal and is seen in many movies and TV shows to this day, depicting a lot of this. Except after all of this abuse, death, and injustice, the spirits have been said to be very aggressive in this prison. In short, it's a terrible place for terrible people, but since many were taken here without trial, I really wonder how many were innocent and ended up passing away in this very prison. In the hump of our list, we have the Cuban Missile Crisis. So this was a time when the world almost ended, so this had to take a spot on this list. The 1962 Cuban Missile missile crisis is considered to be the most intense 13 days of the Cold War, and this is because one single misstep could have meant nuclear destruction all over the world. Following the failed Bay of Pigs invasion, the missile crisis began when US surveillance discovered that the Soviets sanctioned missiles all the way in Cuba. And why did this scare Americans? Because Cuba is only 90 miles away from Florida. So the US debated whether to send an air raid or perhaps an invasion of Cuba to destroy these supposed missiles. After these 13 days of intense negotiations, with everyone a millimeter away from nuking each other, President John F. Kennedy and the Soviet leader were able to make a deal. At number 4 spot, we have the house in Pinar del Rio. Although the date of when this house was built is unknown, what is known is that it has been abandoned for over 20 years. This property is located right at kilometer 78 of the highway that connects Havana with Pinar del Rio. And every time someone decides to visit this abandoned house, they come out reporting something very strange and sometimes supernatural. Former residents of the home have all left due to feeling uncomfortable in the house. For example, couples who stayed would slowly begin to argue more and more aggressively. Some have told others that it's impossible to sleep at night because of the constant nightmares you get in this house. At number 3 spot, we have the Leeward Point Field. The US military airfield, Leeward Point Field, is located near the famous Guantanamo prison right along the scenic coast. As you may be aware, Guantanamo is a US naval base that uses Leeward Point Field for air transport. Much of the area is tranquil and park-like with views of the rocky coastline. Many people enjoy taking early evening strolls in the area as well. Many people have reported seeing a woman dressed in white though, possibly in a white uniform, walking dangerously close to the cliffs. She appears friendly at first, but then leaps to her death on the rocks below. Bystanders rush helplessly to the scene, only to discover nothing and no one down below. At number 2 spot, we have Finca Vigia. This beautiful residence was built in 1886 and is located in San Francisco de Paula Ward in Havana, Cuba. At first glance, this house looks very cozy, bright, and very livable, but that's until you hear what's really on the inside. The Hemingway family would live in the house from the mid-1930s to 1960. Ernest Hemingway was a famous American novelist and journalist. He would be constantly writing on his typewriter in the home, but just after he moved out in 1960, he would take his own life in his home in Idaho. Now it's said that his spirit is still within this house, since this is the spot he spent a large majority in, along with his creative ideas. Staff report hearing a typewriter, but always in another room. They go to look, but only to find no one there and no typewriter. All the way at our number 1 spot, we have Cementerio the Arena. This cemetery is essentially an outdoor crumbling art museum. This was a monument to plantation farming and wealthy trade barons when it first opened in the 1800s. Most of the tombs here are crowned with massive statues of beauty and grace. In recent years, the cemetery has fallen into disrepair and has been targeted by grave robbers. Sleeping Beauty statue is one of the many statues that stands out to most of the visitors. The young woman buried there was promised to an older wealthy plantation owner, but her heart belonged to a young local boy instead. When her wedding drew near, she ran off and married her true sweetheart. Unfortunately, she died soon after of cholera. Regardless of her betrayal, the older man buried her in the family space and erected the large statue that stands today, a restless spirit in life and death. And these are the top 10 Cuba scary urban legends here. What should we do next? Leave a comment down below because we see that. I'm your host Andrew, and we'll catch you guys on the next one.